I just want to enumerate 7 different aspects of that relationship that we might be able to learn from. The first is that it takes time. The U.S.-Israel relationship in its breadth and depth is about as strong as our bilateral relationship with any other country. The defense relationship with Israel just began about 50 years ago after the June 1967 war, went through major changes in the 80s under President Reagan. Later on, missile defense cooperation under President H.W. Bush, then a series of 10-year memoranda of understanding, locking in security assistance to Israel, another one of those just signed about a year and a half ago, locking in both security assistance and missile defense. The point of all this is this did not happen overnight. It did not just take years, it took decades and decades, and there were a lot of bumps in the road. And it's important to keep that perspective. Rich mentioned the concept of qualitative military edge. That concept was developed in the 1980s, that we would provide Israel with the capabilities it needed not only to stand up to a single enemy, but the totality of its enemies. And that didn't get enshrined into law until 2008. The point is that these type of relationships take time. Aspect number 2, and that is you need to build a political consensus in the United States for these type of relationships to be enduring and sustainable. And that means bipartisanship in the U.S. context. It means that being supportive of Israel can't just be part of one domain, the domain of one party. It's got to be across the board. So that would be another thing that I would look at. Thirdly, you need the buy-in from both administration and Congress. You can't just focus in on the administration. For example, in the U.S.-Israel relationship, Congress is where most of the initiatives have taken place. Rich has served both in Congress and in the executive branch and knows of what I speak because I spent a lot of time with him when he was working in the Congress. Fourth is the strong U.S.-Israel relationship is multi-layered. It's both in the security realm and it's in the non-security realm. I mentioned the concept of qualitative military edge. I mentioned the aid agreements that the United States has had with Israel. But there are so many institutions that have been set up on the security side. The creation of the Joint Political and Military Group in 1983. Later on, a high-level strategic dialogue. You have ongoing conversations between the chiefs of staff of both countries. You have the United States stockpiling ammunition and other equipment in Israel. You have joint training. You have defense industrial cooperation. Just in the last year, the U.S. National Security Council and its counterpart called the National Cyber Directorate in Israel formed a joint working group. Those are all in the area of security. But in the non-security area, going back to the 1970s, you had 3 foundations established by both countries dealing with science, dealing with agriculture research, and dealing with the commercialization of technology. You had a free trade agreement going back to the 1980s. In more recent years, you have funding for joint energy cooperation and homeland security cooperation.
Jeff, I'm going to have to urge you to finish your opening remarks because
Okay, sure. The other two points I want to make is that the benefits have to be 2 ways. Relationships, enduring relationships aren't just a giver and a receiver, they have to go both ways. And the last point I want to make is that enduring relationships have to transcend political differences between the 2 countries. Countries are not always going to see eye to eye, but you have to, even when you have disagreements, you have to continue the levels of cooperation both on the security front and in the non-security front.